There's a catchy name. Foundations in the future that determine our present. So sometimes we have to kind of enter into this world, the physical world that we're in, from a philosophical perspective. So we're kind of relinquish our hold on the practical for just a minute while we delve into time past and time ahead, and then how does that all impact where we are right here, right now, in this place? And that's what we're going to talk about. Because there are some serious things, decisions to be made. There's a huge vote coming up soon in November. There are decisions to be made that impact the people of this country, and whatever that decision is, or those decisions are, will determine not only the direction of this country, but the countries of the world. So it's not just an easy thing to just jump into. This is a huge decision-making process that sometimes becomes more generated from how does it affect me, my pocketbook, my buddies, my programs, and so that's what you hear in the news often. And what we're going to look at for this bonus session this afternoon is not that. It may come to that, but we're looking at this from another perspective. So let me take you to the beginning. So in the beginning, and we'll have these little graphics up here that actually have nothing to do with anything except they just filled that spot. Out of eternity came space, time, and matter. That's the part that just hold on to that. Out of eternity, God created. He has always existed. At some point in eternity, he decides, I'm going to create this. And so what we know about is the result of that moment. So in order to do that, he made a space in eternity. Inside of that, he also placed time, which he created. We live in time, so we don't even have a concept of that not existing. So the whole idea of time not being here, or if we were to even try to explain it, which we struggle with, it's like asking a fish what it's like to be wet. That's just where they live. And we live in time. So to try to force ourselves to think outside of time, what that is, how that works, how does that function, how do we function without that? Because it's such a part of everything we do. And with God, time is just something he created for us to live in. So space and time are created. Then the material things that we see were created. But without space and time, you don't have those things. So all of it goes together, space, time, and matter. So that's in the past, out of eternity. And we have space, time, and matter will be brought into eternity. One day, Jesus is coming back. We shall behold him. And all of this will be folded into the eternal that God has already prepared. So we're coming into it from eternity. This will all be brought into what's coming in eternity. And then this universe, this world, the way he's made it, will be prepared, and we will be prepared to live in that timeless existence, which we can't even touch on because we don't know what it's like to be timeless yet. Living in the space-time material world embraced by eternity. That's where we are now. So we have to survive in this and live day to day in a world that is made up of space, time, material, and our existence is impacted by that, and we have to make decisions every day based on that. But eternity is making the ultimate decisions, or the ultimate end of all things is out there. Eternal, what God has in the eternals, where all of life is going, is impacted by the eternals. So what has been, what is coming, and then what is. All of that's the foundations and the future that determine our present. So we have to have all of that in mind, even on the simplest decisions. And it's hard to wrap your head around it if you have to work through that every time. But we are supposed to. That's supposed to be a normal part of living for Christ. That kind of thinking is what goes into every day. When I get up in the morning, that's what I'm doing. You go, I don't know. Well, remember up. Just a simple little word. Here's where we go. Not the movie, just the word. Colossians 3, 1 and 2. Since you have been raised to new life with Christ, set your sights on the realities of heaven, where Christ sits in the place of honor at God's right hand. Think about the things of heaven, not the things of earth. See it? Since you've been raised to new life in Christ. So that's a transitional thing, transformational thing that has happened in the lives of all those who know Christ. No longer the same, no longer thinking like the world, no longer gravitating to the world. Our thoughts are supposed to be seated in the heavenlies, into the eternal, not locked into the material, space-time present. Have you noticed that most of your decision-making has to do with the space-time present? And he's saying that'll trap us. It'll frustrate us. It will entangle our steps. It will keep us from reaching the heights that God has intended for us to reach. It requires thinking as he wants us to think. And that means getting our heads up there in the heavens and seeing things from an eternal perspective, and then looking back so we can see there's an eternal past, there's an eternal future. We're living here in the midst of it, but we're carrying out what God has given us with that in mind, with all of that in mind, the foundations and the future that are impacting us here. So that's part of it. So the eternal reality is the thing above the line that is that's the above everything, and it impacts all of it. And everything will ultimately answer to that eternal reality. So space-time and matter are below that. That's below the line, and we're going to have this line show up in a number of different places. But just keep that up, just in the forefront of your thinking, up. So thinking heaven, thinking what is God doing? Where is God going with this? What's the eternal perspective? I want to keep that in mind, no matter what else comes up. So remember up and the power of government. Remember up and the power of government. This is Jesus interacting with Pilate in John 19. And he says, "Why don't you talk to me?" Pilate demanded. He's trying to get Jesus to respond. He's throwing out all kinds of offers and questions and threats and whatever else he can throw out. And everybody else has been on Jesus all night. And Pilate's throwing this out. "Don't you realize that I have the power to release you or crucify you?" So he's the government. He's the authority. He has the power. And Jesus, he knows that. So he can call it. And he does. But what does that bring to mind? That there's something going on here, that he sees himself as a representative of the Roman Empire as having ultimate authority, because it has to do with life and death. He has ultimate authority, and that's how governments think. Jesus says, "You would have no power over me at all unless it were given to you from above." See the line? There's a higher government, there's a lower government, and there is a huge difference between the two. One is based on the eternal foundations of the past and what God has done in establishing space-time, material things, this world, this order that we live in, and then what's coming, because Jesus also knows that. He also knows what's above the line. He says, "You can kill me, but it ain't going to help because in 3 days I'm back. And if I didn't want you to kill me, I can stop that too. So in reality, you have no authority over me at all. Guess whose children we are? And yet we crumble at the thought that someone might threaten us with something like that. You go, really? Whose children are we? Who has ultimate authority? And if we die, but we live. And we live better than we ever have before. So obviously we should be afraid of that. No. We should be rejoicing for that, looking forward to that. And Jesus is not, this doesn't bother him at all. He knows his purpose. He knows what he's doing. The authority, just the statement by Pilate is like, nope, there's a higher authority. And whether you recognize it or not, Roman official, you do not have it. It belongs somewhere else. In fact, to the person you're speaking to, which you didn't go into. But why don't you talk to me? Don't you realize I have the power? No, you don't. No. Yeah. And he's waiting for him to, yeah. But there's a higher government, there's a lower government, and he's making sure that Pilate got a little bit of a picture of that. And we have to realize that, which is part of the remember the up part of this thing. We are to set our sights on the realities of heaven. See, even saying those words, the realities of heaven. When we think heavenly stuff, it's typically not real. This is real. This is practical. That's maybe, it's mythological. It's nice to think about. But really, I'm more concerned about today and groceries and gas and tires. And he said, no, keep your eyes on that. Think about that. Remember, he's in control, that he's working some things, and he's working them in us and around us in our world. And government is one of those. So we remember that there's a higher government, that the governments that we see or are played out before us are not the highest government. They're representatives, and God has turned them loose to reduce chaos in our world. So that's part of that process. Remember up and the evaluation of government. So now how do these people, how do we hold them accountable? What's the proper process? How we get so frustrated. We have no way of dealing with some of this. So remember up and the evaluation of government. This is in 1 Kings 15. Nadab, son of Jeroboam, began to rule over Israel in the second year of King Asa's reign in Judah. He reigned in Israel 2 years. Here's the evaluation. But he did what was evil in the Lord's sight and followed the example of his father, continuing the sins that Jeroboam had led Israel to commit. There's a higher government and a lower government. Here's the king. Began to rule over Israel. He's a king, he's ruling. Is he the final authority? No. There's a higher government. And he is being held accountable because he did what was evil in the Lord's sight. Who has the ultimate and the highest authority. So it's the Lord's call. What about presidents? What about senators? What about judges? What about people you deal with in a local social security office? Because that's an interesting thing. So, higher government. What do we forget when we get in those frustrating moments in dealing with people? We forget up. We need to remember God is on the throne, that he is accomplishing his purposes, that he is taking all that was in the past and taking us to a glorious future. And we are in the midst of this as he is working out his plan. Nadab, son of Jeroboam, is in big trouble. And many others are too. But God does not miss it. He doesn't miss it that they have not done what is pleasing in his sight. Now, they may accomplish some things, and they may accomplish some good in terms of holding the economy together or protecting the country, or, there's some governmental things. And that's why he has them there. Because the lack of them, look in local news or recent news, in local governments where they decided, well, let's just pull the police back. So the government stepped back from its responsibility to control and limit chaos. And we have whole inner cities that just exploded. People's businesses they'd worked a lifetime for burnt down. And it's chaos. What happened to government? They just said, no, we're not going to do, that's their job. That's the only responsibility they have is to reduce chaos. And they blew it. Do we need government? Yeah, even bad ones can reduce chaos. But they walked away from that responsibility, and it's evil in the Lord's sight. But there's a higher government. God is still working those things out. Lower government, we still need them, and they're functioning in different ways. Remember up and the ultimate judgment. There's a higher judgment above the line, lower judgment below the line. Revelation chapter 20. I saw a great white throne and the one sitting on it. The earth and sky fled from his presence, but they found no place to hide. I saw the dead, both great and small, standing before God's throne. And the books were opened, including the book of life, and the dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. So the books are brought out, and people are brought before the Lord, who's on his throne, who is going to make the judgment call. And he knows every detail. There are no excuses. There are no ifs, ands, and buts. And, well, I'm this color, they're that color. They had this much money. I didn't have that much money. They had education. I didn't have. Everybody. The books will be opened, and the judge will judge, and he will do so with absolute accuracy. That's a higher judgment. All the other human versions of this fall under that, and they're necessary, but they're faulty. They don't come close to this one. When God looks at a person and can judge, it will not miss the mark. Everything will be held appropriately. The dead were judged according to what they had done. Remember up and the human condition. Remember up and the human condition. So truth is above the line. Human reason is below the line. God's truth reigns. Human reason becomes, he gave it to us to be used wisely and has a place. But it also becomes something we lean on, which is why we have Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. But we're so used to our own understanding and hearing our own voice in our heads that that's the one we trust more often than we do him, because we forget up, that there's a higher realm, that there is a higher decision maker, that there is one who is looking out for us from eternity, who established the foundations and presents us a future, and he wants to impact our lives here and now, and we can trust him. So we trust in the Lord with all our heart. But we have to deal with us as humans and go, well, okay, I need to do that. So what's the problem with just being me? You know, I'm pretty smart. I can figure this out. Jeremiah 17:9, the human heart is the most deceitful of all things and desperately wicked. Who really knows how bad it is? So that very thing that people tell you all the time, just go with your heart, just listen to your heart, just is the worst advice ever. And yet, we listen to that one. Rarely do we pull out Jeremiah 17:9 and go, no, I need to watch that, because somewhere my heart's probably going to mislead and misdirect me, and I need to trust the Lord in these things so that my decision-making processes are pure and good and profitable, not only for me, but for his purposes in this world, for others, for the community, maybe for the whole world. Remember up. Truth, his truth, is the ultimate, and we return to that to make our decisions and to move forward in however we're going to live life. Human reason probably trip us up. We want to get better, and we can, the more we include trusting God and developing our lives and living our lives based on his truth, our reasoning will get better. But if we're just relying on our human reason, well, that's how we got where we are. So, all that to lead us to this simple little thing we're going to look at. 3 branches of government. You may remember this from school. Executive, legislative, and judicial. Now, those 3 are there for a reason. Because when the people came from Europe to settle this country, they came in here and said, you know what? We need to trust the Lord, not our own human reasoning. Our hearts are deceitful and desperately wicked. We need to be careful. Because if we give power to one person or one group, this thing could go sideways real quick. How'd they know that? Because they came out of Europe. They were a colony. What did they see in Europe? They saw King George. George had problems, but he also has power. What did they see in France? King with power. And they're just seeing people in Europe who are running this thing, and if it wasn't them, then Parliament would take over, or a group of people, or a group of judges, or a group of rich people, or a group of whatever, and then they enslave the whole community, and this is how we're going to do this from now on. And they go, you know what? We need a better way to do this. How about we divide the power, and let's divide it into 3. So that's how we came up with the 3. You've got an executive. It is hard to get, if you have a oligarchy and you have a group of people making decisions, you go, well, we're going to have this group of 3, 5, 7, this group make decisions on how to run the country. We need to make a quick decision, and we need to send the army in because they've just invaded from Canada, which is always a huge threat. So what are we going to do about those guys? And you've got that many people debating this, fighting about it. Well, you know, my little niece lives up there in Ontario. We can't. So you got all of the feelings and you can't make a decision, and it takes days. You got to have one person who's got to say, go. When are we going to strike? Now, 9 o'clock. We got to do it Monday. That's an executive. So you sign the executive order to defend the country or to make a move in the country in particular directions. Somebody has to set that pace. It's better to have one person. Now they need advisors, which is why there's a whole cabinet that goes with them to provide information, but that decision making comes down to one for good reason. But the executive does not have absolute power in the system, because the legislature is the one who comes up with the funding and the direction. They come up with the laws, so they have to meet and they have to debate this. And if you notice, even for across the states, that's broken up into 2 houses. You got Senate, you got the House. The Senate represents each state with two senators from each state to balance out the whole. So Rhode Island has the exact same power that California does. Tiniest little state, most populous state, and they have the same power in the Senate, because that's how this was arranged to balance this thing. House of Representatives is based on population, so California has a whole lot more say than Rhode Island. And it just, they saw a way of doing this to spread it out a little bit so that the little guy doesn't get squished and the big guy doesn't become the all-powerful. And then everybody has a say, and you can look out for each other. Because our hearts are desperately wicked. And we're going to look for ways to get over on the other guy. Always. Look at the regional differences. It's just coming up in the news. You can watch it pretty much every day and see the differences. How do we respond to a pandemic? Regional differences all over the place. And it's all different people saying, well, there's an eternal, there's a heavenly, there's a God in heaven. No, it's my own reasoning or my own deceitful heart. And you see it just break out. So they came up with an executive, a legislature, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch was set aside to say whatever the laws are that come up through the legislative part of this, and the executive branch, the president has to sign off on it. So that's two branches. Then the judicial looks at that and says, how does that meet the burden of being what was stated in the laws in the Constitution? The highest court here is the Supreme Court, and their job is to protect the Constitution. It's not to make people happy. It's to protect the Constitution and what that says. So when those things are written and the legislature puts that out there, which is part of the problem we'll come back to after this in just a second, they have to resolve those issues with those 9 judges who are sitting up there, who are only supposed to look at the law and say yes or no based on, does that fit? Does that flow from where we're supposed to go with these laws? And that's where we have departed in recent times. So run that darling video.
The United States Constitution divides the federal government into 3 branches. It does this to ensure a central government in which no individual or group gains too much control. Those branches are the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. Let's discuss the judicial branch of the United States. The judicial branch is led by the Supreme Court of the United States. Supreme Court justices are responsible for upholding this guy, the United States Constitution. The Supreme Court of the United States is located in Washington, D.C. The Supreme Court of the United States decides if laws are constitutional. Members of the Supreme Court are appointed by the President. They interpret the laws of the Constitution for citizens to understand. Supreme Court justices hold the position for life. The Supreme Court is the only court that is provided for in the Constitution. Nomination is based on the candidate's character and past decisions that they've made. Members of the Supreme Court are nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate. Aha! Here are the Supreme Court justices. Notice that there's 9 of them, and they're very diverse, with men and women and people of different ethnicities. Only certain cases actually make it to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court justices rule on a decision. Supreme Court justices have to have the ability to put themselves in other people's shoes, so they can see both sides of every argument. Now let's talk about the legislative branch. The legislative branch is the Congress. It's made up of 2 parts, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Congress makes new laws that must be signed by the President to be enforced. Congress confirms presidential appointments and they make laws. The Congress reflects the interests of their residing state. The Congress meets in Washington, D.C. at the United States Capitol building. Congress is made up of 2 parts, the Senate and the House of Representatives. There are qualifications in order to be a member of the Senate. You must be at least 30 years old. You must have been a citizen for at least 9 years. And you have to be a resident of the state in which he or she is chosen. Senators have a term limit of 6 years. There are 2 senators for every state in the United States. There are sole powers that exist within the Senate. The Senate can try an impeached official, such as the President, Vice President, or Supreme Court Justice. It can confirm presidential appointments, such as if the country needs a new Attorney General, the President will make an appointment. The Senate has to confirm the appointment, and it can ratify treaties. The Vice President serves as the President of the Senate. The Vice President only votes in the presence of a tie. There are qualifications to work in the United States House of Representatives. You must be at least 25 years old. You must have been a United States citizen for at least 7 years. And you must be a resident of the state from which he or she is chosen. Members of Congress have a term limit of 2 years. There are currently 435 representatives in Congress. Every state gets at least 1 representative. California has the most representatives because it has the largest population of American citizens living within it. Sole powers that exist within the House of Representatives include they vote on charges of impeachment, and they can propose bills for raising revenue. The Speaker of the House is elected by the House's majority party. The Speaker recognizes speakers and controls floor debate. They determine committee assignments for members, and they assign bills to committees. Now let's discuss the executive branch of government. This includes the President of the United States. The President signs bills into law and vetoes bills that he or she does not like. The President pardons or frees people that he or she feels is innocent of a crime. The President appoints judges to interpret the laws of the Constitution for its citizens. Not just anyone can become president. To become president of the United States, you must be at least 35 years old. You must be a natural-born citizen of the United States, and you must have been a resident of the United States for the last 14 years. The President serves as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. They accept or veto congressional bills. They make treaties with help from the Senate. They make appointments of public officials like judges. They give an annual State of the Union address to recommend the legislative agenda for the next year. And they have the power to grant pardons in all federal cases except those of impeachment. The President can't do it all, so he or she can elect someone to lead an area of government that can help them make informed decisions, such as the Department of Agriculture or the Department of Education. Why do I feel so powerful sitting in this chair? It might be because I'm sitting in the Oval Office, which is the office of the President of the United States. The presidency is a powerful position. There have been lots of men that have had the opportunity to serve as President of the United States. The first African American was elected in 2008. His name was Barack Obama. A woman has never been elected President of the United States, at least not yet. The building behind me here is the White House. It's located in Washington, D.C. The President of the United States and his family lives here during the time that he serves as President. Being President of the United States is a difficult job. In 1 minute, you can be the most popular person in the United States, and you can be extremely unpopular in the next. Presidents have demanding schedules. They have a lot of people to answer to for every decision that they make, including the American people. Maybe our founding fathers knew that when they drafted the Constitution of the United States. One man or one branch of government can't do all of the work for the entire country. You know what they say, there's no I in team. It takes a team to run our country. And that team is made of the 3 branches of government: the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. There are checks and balances in the federal government. No branch has any more power.
Aw. But the video has power. I guess he's done talking. All right. Well, you have the idea. I thought I would go with the elementary education version of this whole thing and kind of put that together. In the course of looking at some of these, Bowtie Guy won, but there are others, and one of them, when it got to the Supreme Court, explaining this to the children in their video, said, and the job of the Supreme Court is to make decisions for the American people that are fair. It's about the Constitution. It's not about fair. If we do the Constitution, it's going to work out that way, but that's not. Thought, what an interesting concept. So if we put that idea and the ideas of elementary children, have you ever taken elementary children in the back seat of a car anywhere? And you don't stop at Wendy's or McDonald's because one of those, or Taco Bell, depending on which one's their favorite, and it's not fair. So now we're going to run our country like that? Anybody see a problem? Yeah. So it's the agreement that has been already made. The way the Constitution came was for each of those states to decide, which they saw as independent countries. Remember back in the colonial days, they saw themselves as independent countries. Those states made a decision to unite around a constitution, those stated documents, those early ones, and they said, this is us, this defines us. See, here's the powers of the presidency, the executive branch, legislative branch, and judicial branch. And so we agree that's what made us Americans, because we're not Americans by blood, we're not Americans by ethnicity, we're Americans by agreement. Even though we're born here, we should know enough about this that we agree, yeah, that's what we're here for. Because we agree we're going to do this together because we have been set aside by God. There's a declaration that said that. And all of us are supposed to be involved in this to make this happen. So that's the process. That's what we're called in to do. And so the 3 branches recognize the problems that exist within humanity, that we can be reasonable people, but we are also, and we are given inalienable rights by our Creator. And we've got that. We're supposed to act within those, using our reasonable judgment. recognizing that in our reasonable judgment that our hearts are deceitful and we're likely to go sideways given enough power. So let's protect each other and look out for each other and come up with a constitution that looks out for all of those things and all those people and all that's unfolding. So the three branches is brilliant. It reflects a very biblical worldview, and those early guys were writing from that perspective, regardless of what modern historians have told you. They were coming from that perspective. The issues, let's look at some of these, because these are happening like in, quick. Presidential election, we got to decide. There's a couple of people there. Unless you're voting for Kanye, then there are a couple other people that you might want to look at for running for president. And in the course of deciding on those kind of decisions, so what do we need at the executive level? What's the job of a president? Well, I like this guy, I don't like that guy. So I've got to decide, how am I going to enter into this? Where's the wisdom? And what is it that the United States represents? What is it that the Constitution is telling me? What is this country about? And how is that person going to help steer this ship the way that it ought to go? And how does it do the best job, or whoever's taking that seat, the best job for the country as a whole? Because we are very diverse and we've got a lot of things going on, so how are you going to do that? And they swear to keep the Constitution. I mean, that's part of when they swear in. That's the deal. Here's the document that tells us this is who we are and what we're about and where we're going. So how do we, so we have to decide that, and so we're going to look at some other things. We'll come back. Supreme Court justices, we have to decide on those people. They are to be deciding based on the Constitution if a law coming from the state, local, or people versus people, whenever it makes it to the Supreme Court and they decide we'll look at it, does that violate the Constitution, the written documents that we have? So we've had legal proceedings that have happened where the idea of the justice was about their own agenda, and they decided to impose the agenda, not the written document of the Constitution, and to persuade others on the court to decide with them. So they were able to argue, which is when they write it out, and they write out their argument, and this is their final the decision. If they get a 5-4 decision, then this thing becomes law. And the fallout of that is, once that is signed, that law is effective across the country from one end to the other, and every local municipality, local government, school, business is now under the impact of that decision. 5-4, so 5 people decide this is the way it ought to go. It's imposed, it's not from the Constitution, it's not as agreed. The way we get the Constitution or the amendments to the Constitution is every state is to look at it, it's supposed to run through the legislature, written up, taken to each state votes on it and says yay or nay. So they look at each amendment and say, we agree, that's the way we want the United States to go. Then the amendment is added, and in the 13 states, the first colonies, those I was talking about, they made that decision. So this thing ran all the way around for a couple of years, argued among the people. They go, here's the pluses and minuses, and they voted. So we get that original document in 1789, and then we begin from there, based on a bunch of people looking at this, deciding on it, and saying, yes, we agree. And we have amendments we can do the same thing with. With the stroke of a pen, our court system, the Supreme Court, has in recent times decided babies should be killed. So we come up with the abortion thing, Roe versus Wade in 73, by the court saying, we, 5-4, decide this should be the law of the land. No amendment, no discussion among 50 states, no legislature involved, 5-4, signed a document, and millions are dead, all because of a Supreme Court that decided not to act as judges, but to act as legislators and make laws, which they did recently with the whole Obergefell thing, where they decided gay marriage is fine. All of that opened the doors. So now if you don't allow men to go into women's bathrooms, women to go into, or whatever they claim to be, into the various restrooms, well, you can be fined. Some states where California wouldn't allow their football team to go to North Carolina because they had a rule about women go to women's bathrooms, men go to men's bathrooms, and because 5-4 signed a document. Did the 50 states decide? Did the legislatures get involved? Did anybody discuss it? No. How important is it that we get a Supreme Court that is actually going to do the work of a judge? It's vital. Because for whatever reason, they have hijacked that part of government that is not theirs to have, not according to the Constitution, shouldn't be allowed at all. And yet here it is. You'll hear in the news that the president is not supposed to appoint the Supreme Court because, it's coming up next week, a decision on the Amy Coney Barrett thing. And anyway, they've already brought her through the Senate. She's been talked about. They've asked her questions. And they'll vote to confirm next week. So what's the president's job? In the Constitution, it says he is to appoint and keep this Supreme Court thing going. So when is he supposed to do it during an election year? It's supposed to happen when there's a vacancy. We have a vacancy. When is he supposed to do it? Because it's in the news. This has been going around and around. They're arguing, well, you should wait till we know who the new president. It doesn't say that. It says that's his job. Until January 20th at noon, that's his job. And if somebody else gets voted in and we don't like him, he still gets to make that call till January 20th at noon. That's the way it's written. But we get a chance to have justices who are judges who, and in this case, she has said that she is an originalist constitutional supporter, and that's what she's taught, and she's been a professor of law, and that's the end of it that she is interested in and promotes, and she knows it. So have a judge who wants to be a judge, who wants to protect the Constitution. I don't know, you might want to pray on that one, that this one gets passed, because it's just a huge decision. And it matters whether the court gets people who are going to make judgment calls based on the law, not based on their feelings, or not based on their agenda that they have decided was the most important thing ever, which is part of what happened with the justice who just passed away and Amy will be replacing, I think is going to replace. She made those decisions, made decisions that were not in the law, not in the Constitution. She just bent it enough to make it fly. And people agreed with her because they agreed with her agenda. Not with the Constitution, with the agenda. We have deceitful hearts, and they will tell us all kinds of things. And people in the Supreme Court have deceitful hearts too. So somebody needs to hold them accountable. Legislature can do that. And you probably saw that. They can hold them accountable, which I think at some point soon that would be really great. Hasn't happened. So the president that's his job to appoint, so that's part of the deal. We are looking at practical things on this planet, in this country, but we're still remembering up. So we've got foundations that come from eternity. We're moving towards eternity, and around us is the heavenly dimension at work. So God is working out his plan, and he's going to do that in and through whoever gets elected or appointed. He's going to accomplish his purposes. But some of this but we also are held accountable. So we decide, well, I'm just not going to vote. It's frustrating. The lines are too long. There's COVID. I can't decide. And God said, I've given you responsibility. You are supposed to take the gifts that I've given you and use them. This is one. You get to vote. Other places, other countries, they don't get to vote. You get to vote. So you go do that. And do it wisely, because I'm going to hold you accountable for how you decide and who you decide on. And when you decide to depart from my wisdom, we're going to have some problems. So I'm calling you together, my people, to vote and move in a direction that's going to be best for you. It's going to glorify God. It's going to help communities, and it's going to help a country, which in our case, you know, if you're Uganda or Uruguay, probably not going to help the whole world, but the U.S., it does. So it matters. So what do we do with that? All right, we got to have an economy. What do we do with the U.S. economy? Well, we've got these concepts that are floating around. So government should cover us. Government is our new God. Government is the one who provides. Government is the source, the supply of all things. So we have a concept that starts to make its way through the people. In the 60s, LBJ, President Johnson decided, you know, we need to have a great war on poverty, and so we need to turn things around. This is going to be the great change. This is going to be even better than the New Deal with FDR, and we're going to come in and we're going to provide, we're just going to give money to whole sections of cities, to whole populations of people. We're going to build homes, and people will have homes, they'll have money, and we're going to set up Medicare, Medicaid, all of that started then, 60s. So we're going to set all of that up, set it in motion, so that everybody is now cared for, taken care of by the government. So now they have checks to live on, and the idea was, or at least for some, that it would be a hand up, not a hand out. What it turned into, as you well know, is just a lifelong dependency on the government and ghetto housing that whole groups of people have lived in, and their lives, their families, their single parent families, missing dads, drugs are thick, and you got whole communities full of that created by this great society LBJ had in mind of, if the government just takes over and hands out everything, health care, food, a check, we solve all the problems. But our hearts are deceitful and desperately wicked. So the idea of, well, I'm getting this much if I just take the check. I don't get that much if I go to work, so I'm not going to take a job. I'd rather have the check. And that job interferes with my other activities, whatever they may be. And then a loss of hope. And then you have a whole bunch of people who are suffering that desperation because they were given handouts and not a hand up. And now they're stuck. And they can't figure a way out of that. And the mentality that comes with that is the idea of, well, one, we're being suggested is we need the government to take over all health care. And if the government takes over all health care and everybody gets health care, then we will be a better society. Every time the government stepped in, when Medicare started, because government stepped in, the medical cost escalated exponentially and still do. The free market medical exercise we had before that limited those expenses, and they didn't skyrocket because the medical profession, the pharmacies, the doctors, everybody was competing in a sense. So they kept it more reasonable even at the hospital level. You start getting the government in, and it says, well, we're going to give you this much for that. And yeah, I don't know if you've been to the dealership to get your car worked on, but if you have your brakes changed, and you could do it at home in an hour, these guys are professionals, and they have really great tools. They can do it in 15 minutes. The book says it's 90 minutes, and they charge $75 an hour. So you go by the book. Doctors have a little book. Here's a coder right here. She knows about the book. They had to write in that code. So that code tells them, and I could get these tonsils out, about 3.5 minutes, because I've done this a lot. But the book says, and the hospital says, we got to set aside an OR. We got to set aside this many nurses. So we're going to charge $923, whatever the number is, for that procedure, and that's the amount of money that goes into it. Where's the free enterprise interaction? So we got government taking over and telling us that's how this ought to run. We do the money. Okay, we need to hand out money. So we need a $15 minimum wage. So we just throw it out there because we think $15 is going to make everybody live well. And the reality is, nobody ever said where the $15 is coming from. And if you go to McDonald's and you want to get something from the dollar menu, but you got to pay everybody in there at least $15, maybe more, plus if you add benefits, because some like California are enforcing that, it costs that employer $55 an hour to keep that person working. How long can you keep a dollar menu for your customers? You can't. You can't keep the lights on. You can't feed the people because now free enterprise doesn't exist. Where does the money come from for free college? Because that's a big one. Let's just give everybody free tuition to every college and waive all the loans that have ever been taken, and we will make this all even. Where does the money come from? If you have a bucket and it's got water in it, and you dip out water, and you go, I'm going to give them twice as much. I'm going to make their cup overflow. And I dump it. The cup's overflowing. How many cups can I overflow before the bucket is empty? And the problem with certain of our governmental wizened individuals is that they think somehow magically this bucket fills itself. The bucket fills itself because people are working. And when people are working, you replace the funds. You replace the water. You get more in there. Does it just magically happen because somebody in the legislature somewhere said we need to pay more money? Nope. Do you know how people who are working for minimum wage at $7 can make $15 an hour? They work hard and they get a different job. Or they work hard in that company and that company promotes them. That's the system that works. We just magically say, you ought to have this. Where does it come from? Now there's no incentive because the government owes me, so I need to be angry. I should march in the center of my city and promote that I've been a victim and I've been victimized all my life because I'm a woman, I'm under 5'10", I'm a different color, whatever it is, and I deserve, the government owes me, and I deserve, and so the government is now my God, my supplier, my keeper, my protector. And I look to government for all those things. So who am I going to vote for? If one person says, you need to go to work, the other guy says, I'm going to double what they're giving you. Now, he has no way of paying for it, but if he says it, what are the majority of people going to say? Gimme. So we have a problem. We have a constitution that guarantees this freedom for people to accomplish great things and is very biblically oriented. So it provides some really good guidance and protections that will prevail if we support it and we support people who will support it. And then we can see great things happening. And we can build up the economy because, as soon as people get back to work and all that starts flowing, it's a free enterprise, capitalist thing, the money starts happening in the way that it ought to, and competition happens. If we do governmental shutdowns, what's COVID done to restaurants across America? Businesses are dying left and right. Probably not a good idea, but hey, it's protection. Well, it's protection for a month or so. Then we kind of got on our feet. So should we keep that up and destroy everyone? And eventually you starve to death if you don't go to work. So, again, but government's God. Government supplies. We need to have the right person giving us free stuff, and if we get another handout from the government so we can make our rent, you know how they did that first one, trillions of dollars out of the U.S. base of taxes we paid in, who's going to replace that? Because this magically doesn't happen. How's that going to affect us in a year or two? How much of our taxes are going to go up because, well, we had to have freebies? You know, what about you just release us to go out there and accomplish what we're designed to accomplish and help each other? We had a free clinic here in town in Mays County to help people who fell between the people on the lower economic scale had some statewide health assistance. People who are Native American had their clinics, their medical health. People who had jobs with benefits had medical health. People who had enough money could buy their own health insurance. There's a group of people who are working their tails off who fall in between. And so the working poor, some of them had businesses here in town, at a storefront. They're doing their time, and here they are in between all of those things, but they couldn't afford to buy their health insurance. And so we started the free clinic, provided that. Doctors, nurses, people, pharmacists contributed, and other organizations and corporations here in town, or in the county, in Mays County, contributed, helped. We were able to provide all that, get people to the PET scans and all the stuff, those things that they needed, and get them on their feet. Then the amazing Obamacare came along, and the rules changed, and we couldn't do it anymore because you can't offer that. Everybody has to go buy their own, and you can't offer help of that sort. So the people who were covered already were already covered. The people who weren't covered now have to go buy their own, which they didn't have to do because we were helping them. But we can't have a free clinic because the rules disappeared that allowed that to happen. Government is your savior, your provider, your protector, and magically can make money come out of the air and take care of everyone. In fact, we're going to give you more than you had before. And the reality is, no, you can't. And that deceitful heart within us, that one that says, gimme, gimme, comes in, and the pocketbook comes in, and we get in trouble. That was not the intent to the U.S. It's not the intent God has for us. The social programs have come to bite us. Are there times when social programs and government can help? Yeah, because it's limiting the chaos, and maybe can organize some things that, like the defense. If we're going to have a national defense, we need a government. Somebody's got to make the call, so we need an executive who can do that, and some generals, and we pay some taxes to make that happen. A road system, we pay that and go, yep, that's worth the money to have roads that work. It'd be great if we got more of the holes filled, but we got roads that work, and that's part of the government thing, and that's social programs. You go, yeah, there's a place for that. But we get into this give or take, build or destroy, and the attitude that enters in is the one that says, I need more. If it's going to affect my pocketbook, if it's going to help me more, I'm going to vote for the person that's going to, bottom line, help me with my stuff. We are Americans who should know the Constitution and the reason this country exists. Beyond that, we are believers in Jesus Christ who should know the foundations of the past, the future set up for us, and the heavenly realm that surrounds us. And we ought to be entering into this with all of that in mind, with knowledge of those things, not knee-jerked by media or feelings or the destructive tendencies that run through my heart that can deceive me, but checking it out so that I know. So it's not gimme, gimme. It's what can I do to make a difference? When I leave this world, I want to leave it better than I found it. What can I do to build? How can I help? If it's just for my family or my community, what difference can I make there? And voting plays a part. The thing we've been talking about, prayer, is huge. It's bigger than voting, actually. It's going to carry more weight, and it's going to make more of a difference and impact more of the whole of this world than we can possibly imagine. And we get to be a part of it. And it's about giving. It's about building. It's not about taking and how can I get a deal and how can the government give me more and I should have more. No, you probably shouldn't. And it's probably time that we all just say, you know what? There are some brilliant people who trusted God and decided, let's put this together best we can. A nation based on laws, which are based on truth from Scripture, that reflect the character of God, and do something right. And see if we can't make it work. Washington didn't think it'd make it 20 years. He was president. He thought it was a good idea. He just thought that tendency in the human heart would cause this thing to explode before we got 20 years in. Well, by 1861, it did explode, and there was a huge battle. There was some stuff that needed to be worked on. It was worked on. We came out of that one. 1 million people died in that one to set some other people free. I think we've done some good. Changed the world. And now we build on that. And we build on it because God has set us in motion with foundations from the past, moving towards a glorious future, surrounded by the heavenly realm. And we get to see him make a difference in our lives. So, remember up. Remember up. So easy to get caught in this. So easy to get entangled and think it's all about us. And there's a whole lot bigger picture going on out there. I got this from Tricia a little while ago. This is from the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. It's their Decision magazine. But this is just the recent one, right? October 2020. You can go on decision.com or decisionmagazine.com, something like that. Anyway, and get this, but this is a voter's guide that just lays out 2 visions for America. And it will lay out the Democratic version, Republican version on religious liberty, conscience rights, abortion, federal funding, national defense, Israel and Jerusalem. All of those things are in there. So you can take a look at something like that. Focus on the Family usually puts one out. I mean, there's a number of them that will show up. They'll give you some, well, it depends on who you listen to. If you listen to Fox News or KRMG and those guys, or if you're CNN, or everything's going to have a different kind of a bent to it. Sometimes it's nice to just look at something and go, okay, side by side, what's being said and what's the position? So you just kind of go through it, and it's kind of helpful to do that kind of thing. Because we need something. On the side of Trump, who can be very aggravating, it's not taking any of that away from him, but out of all of the people we've ever had sitting in the presidency, the guy has done more to oppose abortion, signed more legislation to protect the unborn, and has done more to set the economy in a direction that would be healthy. And this one is just amazing. After 2,000 years of Jerusalem not being the capital of Israel, after 2,000 years, and we had Bushes, who were both Christians, Reagan, Christian, none of them were determined to make Jerusalem capital of Israel again. Trump did, against protest around the world. Because God called him for this time to do it. Out of all of the people who stood in that office, no one had the guts to say Jerusalem is capital of Israel. The person who stood after World War II and said Israel deserves a place took all kinds of heat. He got all kinds of grief. And yet, after all of that settled down, Israel, on May 14th, 1948, becomes a nation again. And it is because of people in this country who have stood firm and decided, God is doing something. We're not here on our own. He has called us to this place. Washington knew it. Lincoln knew it. And strangely enough, Trump knows it. Now, if it cut off his Twitter account, probably be great. But in terms of knowing that God is at work, he's also a baby Christian, so you can cut him a little slack. But in terms of knowing that God is doing something, and he's done it, so if that's it, and it's one term, he did something no one else did. And that's not only just a national thing, international thing. That is a prophetic thing. 2,000 years. And it changed. Truman was the other one, because he's the one who said, nope, Israel deserves to be there. And he signed off on it. And because of that, Israel came into existence. And the rabbis, the leading rabbis, said Truman was the Cyrus, if you remember that from Isaiah, the Cyrus who returned the people to the land. Now the modern rabbis are saying Trump has done the same. He's a new Cyrus. Pretty powerful. Let's pray. Father, thank you for allowing us to live in this country, to make decisions, to be able to vote, to be part of what you are doing. It's bigger than we are. It's lasted a while. It's being attacked, as everything good is and will be. But I pray that we would have wisdom, that we would listen to you, that we would not allow our desperation or deceitful hearts to take us in directions that are not healthy. I pray, Lord, that we could enter into this, even debates with people, with love and truth. And Lord, that in every conversation we can point to you, recognizing, Lord, that you are in charge of the foundations that laid the groundwork, that you are the one to whom we will answer in the future, and that your heavenly